Hey Julie, it's Mia. I just thought I would take a crack at using technology to share the talk that I gave at the recent Australian Animal Welfare Strategy, or AWS as we shorten it down to, national workshop. I thought that might be one of the easiest ways to tell you about the work that I've been doing, is to share the talk that I delivered at the conference. I guess it's important to let you know this was the 6th national conference, and I joined the working group to advance working dog welfare just prior to the first national workshop. So I've been involved with them for 6 years now, and even though I was the one giving the talk about the work that we've done since then, and my name's on the PowerPoint, it's very much been a collaborative effort, both with Paul McGreevy, who's also on the working group, and has been co-leading these research projects with me, and also Nick Branson, our external consultant. But we've lots of helpful input from all of our stakeholder groups that are represented on the AWS working group. So, I guess the support for working dogs in Australia originates from their historical role within Australian agriculture, but it's now a very diverse industry. And for the purposes of the projects that I'll be talking about, we chose to define a working dog as a domestic dog kept for non-companion animal purposes and working in one of the following industry sector contexts. So we have our private sector, and that incorporates our farm dogs used for livestock herding and guardian work or protection work. Dogs involved with hunting. There's quite a lot of feral animal hunting like pigs that's conducted in Australia, and also animals used for personal or property security or guard work. In the government sector, we have our Australian Defence Forces, Customs, Quarantine, Police and Correctional Services. The assistance dog sector is typically the guide and seeing eye dogs, hearing assistance dogs, search and rescue, other physical assistance animals, or dogs rather. Within the sporting sector, we've got greyhound racing is probably the key player, but we also have dogs involved in sheep and cattle trials, and also Schutzhund, or I guess competitive guard work. These Australian working dog sectors generally operate in isolation, and they're not supported by cohesive research and development or a single overarching peak body, although many of the sectors do have their own peak bodies, such as Greyhounds Australasia, or organisations such as the Working Kelpie Council or the Australian Sheepdog Workers Association within the private sector. All the dogs involved in work in Australia are kept in a broad range of situations. So for example, a guide dog's obviously kept fairly highly visible in the public eye, whereas a dog that's used for farm work on a rural property, or even a military dog on an Air Force base, are in comparatively private conditions. The Australian Animal Welfare Strategy aims, at the stage that we started this work, were to engage and involve stakeholders in animal welfare matters, not necessarily to resolve those matters themselves. AWS tends to be a little bit more advisory in nature, and it's actually up to the stakeholders or the people with the animals to realise the changes in terms of provision of animal welfare. At the beginning, when I started, we had the issue that even the proactive groups keen to do things to help the welfare of their dogs weren't really sure where to start. We know that public interest in dogs and their welfare is high. A study conducted by Franklin showed that 88% of Australians ascribe family membership to animals, and a survey that I conducted as part of my PhD research in 2010 shows that 95% of Australians rate the welfare of dogs as being very important to them. There's very little published data regarding Australian working dogs in the scientific literature. We don't even have an accurate estimate of the numbers of working dogs in Australia. Estimates suggest at least 100,000, but it could be as high as 250,000. The farm dog sector is just a bit of an unknown. And there have been a lot of guesses made based on the number of sheep stations, and assuming each sheep station has 4 working dogs, but we don't have a known figure. Our working group subgroup was in a challenging position at the beginning, trying to work out where to begin and how to focus our resources to advance welfare. We decided that a benchmarking exercise was required to help inform further development. So So in line with the first goal of OARS at that stage, which was to develop an enhanced national approach and commitment to ensure high standards of animal welfare based on a concise outline of current processes, the inaugural Australian Working Dog Survey was conducted in 2009. This provided a national outline of current processes in Australia's working dog industry sectors in the areas of sourcing of dogs, breeding and raising, assessment, training, methodology, the education of trainers, housing and husbandry, the healthcare of the dogs, and what happened when they each reached the end of their working career. So whether they were rehoused into a different working dog program, whether they were rehoused as a pet, or whether they were euthanized. The results represented 4,195 working dogs, and they are presented in the Australian Working Dog Survey Report, which is readily available through the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries website. Based on the information we received from industry respondents, there were 4 key recommendations made in the Australian Working Dog Survey Report. We certainly had challenges in recruiting participants from all sectors, and given that this was a self-reporting survey, we recognise that we probably got a biased indication of the state of working dogs in Australia. That said, there were still some really interesting results that came out of this in terms of areas that could be identified as room for improvement in terms of provision of welfare to our working dogs. So these initial recommendations were extended in the follow-up Australian Working Dog Industry Action Plan that aim to address goals of the OARS intended to achieve sustainable improvements in animal welfare based on national and international benchmarks, scientific evaluation and research, and also looking at effective communication, education and training across the whole community to promote an improved understanding of animal welfare. The action plan extended the preliminary findings of the survey and included an online industry consultation survey that sought stakeholder feedback on the recommendations from the original survey report. It asked them how important they felt each of the recommendations was to the welfare of dogs in their sector, and also asked them to rank the recommendations against each other, giving us good insight into what the stakeholders felt could really promote animal welfare within their sector. Now, I know you can't see the detail in this table, but basically our action plan has been summarised here, and it's supported by a 30-page document that explores all the mechanisms to benefit both working dogs and those who use them, and outlines the processes and background research behind this final table. I'll go forward now and explain a little bit more what you can't see here, but essentially we've got a key purpose that is supported by goals, with targets set to measure our progress and strategies to enable those targets to be realised. So the action plan has a primary purpose, which is to engage and unite the Australian working dog industry to advance the welfare and productivity of Australia's iconic working dogs. The goals that we have to support this purpose focus on 3 central themes. The first goal is to engage all industry stakeholders in a collaborative partnership ensuring the optimised performance, productivity and sustainable development of the Australian working dog industry. The second goal is to promote an evidence-based best practice industry environment with an ethos of continuous quality improvement. And our third goal is to facilitate open communication and knowledge sharing between all working dog stakeholders on a national scale. The goals are in turn defined by assigning the targets, or the what. These are measurable objectives, or what success will look like, to be achieved over the 3-year life of the action plan. The targets are in turn enabled by strategies, which is the how, who and when, which outline what is required to achieve the targets and assign a time frame. So if we look at one of our targets falling under the third goal to do with communication and knowledge sharing, our target is to establish an annual working dog welfare and performance science conference to promote liaison within and between industry sectors, and the strategy to enable that is for the working group to seek seed funding to facilitate the planning for the first event to be held next year. What was really fantastic during the first day of the conference before I spoke on the second day was hearing so many of the concepts that people were wanting to see realised through OARS, and knowing that they were actually contained in this action plan project that we've developed. So that was really exciting. People really want to talk about education and accreditation being built into the animal industries, and we've certainly incorporated that here. You know, talking about development of best practice and continuous improvement, and they're key to our action plan. In terms of knowledge sharing and communication, again, that's something that we've really emphasised here. So that was really, I guess, reinforcing that we were heading down the right track with this project. So looking forwards, we know that higher standards of animal welfare underpin both industry productivity and sustainability. We recognise that not all stakeholders will be motivated to change current practices solely to improve animal welfare standards. However, we advise that it would be good for the industry at large to recognise that both public and market expectations are moving towards higher standards of animal care and greater transparency of processes. The action plan that we've developed now provides a roadmap for all stakeholders to advance the welfare and productivity measures of their working dogs. And an industry-wide adoption of an ethos of continuous quality improvement, voluntary welfare accreditation and certified training qualifications will result in a degree of difference in service providers. We believe that market forces will then influence adoption of best practice by this industry. Our challenge ahead really lies in engaging all of the industry sectors and convincing them that this is the way forward. The Australian Working Dog Industry Action Plan was submitted to DAF, which is our government department, in July, and it is actually now available to all stakeholders online, and I'll post that link within the blog post. It's really important that we're able to give our stakeholders who participated in the consultation surveys the finished document as soon as we can, to achieve engagement and maintain positivity about this sort of work with the government and the ORS process. As you know, these projects were presented in my poster that's pictured there at the recent Canine Science Forum, because that's where we met, and through this we were able to put together a list of over 80 international stakeholders who are really interested in the work that the government is doing in Australia and want to be kept informed as to how this part of the strategy progresses. I finish once again by thanking my collaborators, which are Paul McGreevy and Nick Franson, and acknowledging that this was very much a team effort. And I guess pretty much in a nutshell, that was my talk. I was lucky that it was really well received. We had a lot of positive feedback and also a lot of interest from other industries looking to, I guess, roll out a similar strategy. It's easy to get overwhelmed, I think, by how much work there is to do in these animal welfare areas within industry. And I think this strategy where you take an overarching goal and break it down into achievable targets and strategies to achieve those targets is very attractive. So we had people coming from the dairy sector and also from the horse sector wanting to know a little bit more about how we've done that. So that was quite exciting. I guess just that others think your work is pretty cool, because obviously I'm passionate about it, but it's nice when other people feel the same way. Okay, I think I've talked enough. I'm going to stop. So maybe I'll just finish up now and say bye, Julie.